Hi, welcome to the Julie Rowe Show. Today is Thursday, September 14th of 2017. I'm here with Eric Smith, getting ready to do another podcast, and we hope that you find this enlightening today. Eric, welcome. Would you like to introduce our topic?
Sure, thanks, Julie. As I've read your books, and many have read your books, and other near-death experience books, there's a recurring theme and pattern. Many people who have gone to the other side have had experiences where they've met and learned more about founding fathers of our country. And you've described them at length in your books. I find your accounts of them to be pretty riveting. And I want to ask you first why you think this is a pattern that comes up in people's near-death experiences, and what have you learned from that?
Wow. Well, I can't speak for other people. I can just speak for myself and what I understand has happened when I had my near-death experience. But it makes sense to me that with what they've shown me, they would show other people, at least in part. Each NDE experience, from what I understand, is tailored to that individual and their specific eternal path, like what their progression is and what their understanding is. And so if they have a specific mission, which each of us do, then they might be shown something about the founding fathers so they can come back and witness and testify or explain some of what they understand about the founding fathers. That's certainly the case for me. I met several of the founding fathers, and I made a commitment, or was reminded when I had that experience, that I had made a premortal commitment as part of my mission to come to the earth at this time and witness and testify about the founding fathers, the importance of Christopher Columbus, other developments that led to the founding fathers establishing the Constitution of the United States of America and leading us into where we are currently with kind of the State of the Union. So I don't know if that answers that for you. Does that answer that, Eric?
Yeah. I guess the question is, why do you think the Lord has seen fit to bless you with the experience of meeting those men on the other side of the veil?
Well, for one, I know that that my role later on is to help with the elders of Israel as we combat the enemy forces and bring to light some of the fight against the Constitution, and then put the Constitution back where it needs to be as we prepare the way for the second coming of the Savior. So it makes sense to me that they would show me past, present, and future related to the wars in this country or in the world, as well as the way that the Constitution was established, and remind me of my premortal connection and relationships and friendships with some of the founding fathers.
Okay.
Specifically, George Washington, James Madison, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Those are some of the main ones that I remember from my NDE. And there was a group of probably 30 different early settlers, men that helped to establish, the Constitution that I met, but those were the leaders that I talked to.
I see. There's an account going around on the internet and things of George Washington, who apparently had visions. When you said that it would make sense that the Lord would show you some past, present, and future concerning our country, I was reminded that George Washington had seen the future of the country that he was starting to help establish. Do you believe that George Washington had those visions of the future?
I know that he did, at least some of them. I don't know if he saw everything I saw, but I know that he had several of them. I was shown the exact vision that he described about the angel coming to him, and it was given to me through George Washington's experience. So I know he saw that. That was witnessed to me through the Savior and through the Spirit more than once. And so I do know that he was a man of God. While not a perfect man, he has and does and still leads armies for the light on the other side of the veil. He did that premortally before he came to earth as one of the founding fathers, before he led the armies here on the earth in the United States, and he is now still doing that on the other side of the veil.
I've always thought it was interesting that George Washington was in such a critical position in the establishment of our country. He ruled as the president, for 2 terms, I understand, and when he was done, he just walked away and went to his humble home in, I think it was Virginia. I can't remember exactly where, but he had a lot of opportunity. A lot of tyrants and people who would have been in that opportunity would have used it to their advantage to become a powerful dictator. And so it seems to be a tribute to the kind of person he was. Can you vouch for the character of George Washington?
Absolutely, I can. In fact, I know him to be a high priest in the church now. He had his temple covenants and his endowment taken care of, and he's been sealed to his wife as well through proxy. He was foreordained to be a high priest. You don't have a man like that become a high priest who isn't a man of God, who accelerates in the priesthood on the other side of the veil, like I see. He and there's a lot more to what goes into George Washington when you're talking about probations and things like that. What I understand about George Washington is that he was foreordained to come to the earth during the times when the United States was just forming, because of what a valiant spirit he was in the premortal realm, and because he had accomplished great things in behalf of the Lord and for the Lord and on the light side. And so, while not a perfect man because he was mortal, his spirit is definitely one of light and goodness.
I always just believed him to be someone who just really valued liberty, freedom, and I would say in a more spiritual term that we use, agency, one who fought for agency
right.
and in premortality, and seems like he would be a natural fit for somebody to establish a free country like ours.
Absolutely. He was one of the great warrior spirits premortally who fought in the war in heaven against the great dragon, the dragon being Satan, as the war was ensuing, and many people decided that they either didn't understand or didn't want to accept the plan of salvation as outlined and explained and taught to us in premortality. And George Washington was one of those leaders that stood for righteousness even then.
Interesting. So if there was a message today, you've talked about those, meeting with the founding fathers on the other side. If there was a message today that they would give us if they were here now, and when I say us, I mean U.S. citizens, what do you think they would want us to know?
Well, I wrote about this in the book on page 69 of A Greater Tomorrow, titled the section titled The Founding Fathers. I may read some excerpts from that in a minute, but I want to speak freely of what I remember. Upon coming, right before I went into essentially what was called the library, and I was out in it wasn't a patio, but it was out in like a corridor area or a garden area, and sitting on a bench was George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. And gathered around them was a crowd of men still wearing uniform that was looked like the time of the Great Revolution. John introduced me to a couple of men on the steps of that library that were wearing white robes. And then they brought me over. We walked over to the group of men, of soldiers, and I was introduced to them. But it was like a reintroduction. I already knew them. I was familiar with all of them. I knew, it was made known to me, it was very clear that they were old friends. We embraced, we talked, we laughed, we joked. And then it got very, very serious. And when it got serious, George Washington was the voice for that. John Adams spoke up, and so did Thomas Jefferson. And they charged me with basically remembering to come back and speak of the importance of the Constitution, the importance of agency more than anything else. The main topic was on the importance of agency. Those gentlemen that were there, those soldiers, had given their lives for the Constitution, had given their lives for the freedom of this country, and they were, although they recognized that it was part of the plan, that things would turn the way they have prior to the tribulations, they wanted to make sure that I knew and I remembered that they had lost their lives, and that this was no small matter, that they had covenanted premortally with the Lord to do so, that they had fulfilled their missions, and they wanted to make sure that I fulfilled mine because of the importance of my mission that would take place once I got back. I'm not going to go into detail on what they meant by that because that was a personal conversation I had with them. But I did promise them, and I told them that I would come back to the earth, that I would remind people of the great men that they are, that I would witness and testify to the world, wherever they may be, and to anyone within the sound of my voice, that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, John Adams, and the other founding fathers had acted by inspiration and had had angelic beings minister to them to give them the words to be written in the Constitution. I was committed, and I did commit, and I commit myself now to witness and testify to the world that this is true. This document came directly from the Lord under his instruction through ministering angels. They had ministering angels help them in the writing of the document, and they had ancestors from the other side of the veil working as guardian angels to help guide them and to keep them and keep the adversary at bay. When I was shown scenes about the Declaration of Independence being written up and signed, and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, when I was shown those scenes, and I've been shown them several times, I don't know how many, over the course of 13 years, I've probably been shown that scene in that room, I don't know, 50 times or something, 60 times. And every time I see it, they also will show me what was going on the other side of the veil with some of the spirits that were surrounding them and the warfare that was going on outside of that room in order to keep the dark entities from preventing the founding fathers from accomplishing the work that they had been sent to do. There was literal warfare going on the spiritual front on mass amounts, and the same thing happened with the actual war when George Washington was leading the troops. Anyone who studies history knows that it was an absolute miracle the war was won.
Mm-hmm.
By all accounts, it shouldn't have happened, right? If you look at the mere numbers and the amount of provisions that we had, I look at it as a type and shadow for what's going to happen now with the elders of Israel as we fight enemy forces. Those enemy forces, including the U.S. government and the troops that will be against us, by all accounts, are much more advanced in their skill level. They're much more advanced. They have the provisions, they have the money, they have the weapons, and the elders of Israel and those that work with them will be at odds. They will be against them, and they will be outnumbered, both physically and from weaponry. But they will have the powers and priestesses of God and the angels on the other side of the veil to help protect them, to help guide them, to inspire them, and to help give them priesthood power to be able to combat enemy forces on both sides of the veil. I see the same thing having happened in the Revolution.
That's a really scriptural pattern for the Lord to do that. It happened in the Book of Mormon. It
Yes.
happened in the Bible, where he starts
Yes.
with a large army and whittles it down to just a few righteous men, and then they take care of
Right.
it. Yeah.
There's a reason in the first book that I also talked about the stripling warriors. The passages that I selected to put in the books, especially the stories from the Bible and from the Book of Mormon, were specifically chosen. John gave me those passages. He told me what to write. He told me how to write them, and I was inspired. And every time I would go to write something different, to add details that I saw that were more exciting or would give more information, I was told to keep it simple, keep it basic, in part because nobody would believe that I'd actually seen that stuff, and it was too much for people. So it was really hard when I wrote the books because I wanted to expound. I wanted to say everything I saw in my head, and I was forbidden by the Lord to do so because I was told to keep it on a fourth grade level for people. And that means on a doctrinal level, that means on a reading level, so that an average adolescent or teenager could read the book, or somebody who had never been exposed to the gospel at all could read the book and gain understanding on a gospel perspective.
Interesting.
And I find it fascinating. I was just thinking I should go back and read my book. I haven't read my book since I wrote it in 2014, and I think it'd be interesting to go back and read it now with the perspectives I have now and the understanding I have now about my mission and about where we are, 3 years later. So,
well,
I may do that. I don't know.
You should. That leads and prompts the question, have you had additional insights since your near-death experience pertaining to the founding fathers?
Absolutely. I keep getting visions of them on the other side of the veil. They each are in charge of armies on the other side of the veil, spiritual armies. I see George Washington as a master general. He's basically a master general who is leading the troops. Joseph Smith is, Noah, Moses. They have their stewardship. And the founding fathers, especially those who've been made high priests, have a different responsibility, kind of a higher priesthood power over certain troops or over certain warrior spirits. And then you've got, those that stand the Bill of Rights. There are several of them that have taken leadership positions on the other side of the veil to help prepare the troops coming for the battles that are ahead.
So,
and I see them practicing. Actually, I see them working actively, and I see them practicing for the war that's coming up. I see them lining up. I see them having face-offs as it is right now, even in Denver or Salt Lake and other places throughout the world.
Can you help those of us who aren't as visually inclined as you, or who have seen those sorts of things? When you say there are troops and they're lining up, I mean, what does this look like?
Like war.
Like they're holding
literally
guns, swords, weapons, or
yes, spiritual weapons. Yes. Yes.
And who is it they're fighting?
Spirits of darkness that also have weapons.
Okay. So I'm imagining, here on the ground, on the earth, we may have people who are actually fighting or going to work or struggling with pornography or other addictions or those kinds of things. And I'm imagining somewhere above my head then George Washington and his troops going against dark forces who are, and maybe this happens on a bigger level. I don't know, congressmen and government leaders.
Or right there next to you, in a different sphere. Because they're all right here in just a different dimension. It's hard to conceptualize because our human minds can't do it. But those that have a thin veil or very little veil know that I speak the truth. And that explains a lot of what we experience in our lives, everything from the miracles we experience as well as the heartaches, the pains, the physical pains, the mental and emotional issues that we suffer from. There's a lot more that goes into this mortal existence than we understand.
So now I'm just kind of wondering, to what extent do they get involved? Would there be a lineup of troops on the other side for me individually, or would that more likely be for like a government leader or somebody who has a more important role?
Well, you have a pretty important role from what I see in the eternity perspective right now, Eric. So I see armies defending you as we speak outside of your home for us to be able to do this podcast recording. I live on 20 acres, and I've got millions of fighters that are constantly on my property defending the space that I live in. Even at that, there are some that are allowed to enter in or that sneak in or come in through cracks and crevices and shields that are broken. But for the most part, I would not be alive were it not for the defense of the priesthood power on the other side of the veil. Wow. And I don't believe you would be either. They intervene far more than we know, and that is their job. We have the warrior spirits on the other side of the veil, that is their sole job right now, to protect, to defend, and to keep at bay as they learn their powers and priesthoods in advance in their estates.
Very interesting. Well, thank you for that witness. That's touching to me. I appreciate it. Mm-hmm. What other sort of things did you see in on the other side of the veil concerning these men and their missions?
Well, gosh, it's hard to know where to go with that.
I can ask another question if you like.
Okay. Well, let me just answer it like this. I see many of the founding fathers as prophets, seers, and revelators.
Interesting.
Not now, but later.
We've talked a lot about founding fathers. Do you have any visuals or understanding concerning women who are fighting for freedom on the other side of the veil?
Yes, that's why I love the Wonder Woman movie. It's one of the many reasons I love it. I joke all the time that I'm truly an Amazon because I had people say that I was an Amazon when I was growing up. I'd have these guys call me an Amazon woman because I'm 5'10", 3/4. I used to take offense at it, and now I think it's a compliment. If I can fight anything like those ladies, well, bring it on. I think that's terrific. Yeah. I do. They work in a different capacity with how they actually spend warfare. There are warrior angels that are women, and then there are also women that are ministering angels. Just like we have men that minister with priesthood blessings, we have women that do the same. We have women that remove the weapons, put solvents on wounds, and things like that in a nursing capacity. Those that are skilled in the dark arts, they all have their assignments, and they are all skilled in certain areas and being taught how to do their missions on the other side of the veil. We have recorders, we have presidents of organizations, we've got secretaries, we've got historians. Basically, everything you see here on Earth is like a type and shout or an example of what's on the other side of the veil. It's just a different realm, and you have the counterfeits of that in the dark worlds in degree, and the degrees of counterfeit are basically based on the degrees of spheres of darkness as you go into lower states.
Julie, can you tell us about your experience growing up with freedom? Were you raised in a freedom-loving home and, valued our freedoms and government and the Constitution and these kinds of things?
Yes, I always felt a strong calling, if you will, to agency. And my dad, being an LDS chaplain in the military, he did 30 years and retired as a full-bird colonel in the United States government of military in the Army, and had a unique situation because he was a chaplain. So he trained in weaponry, although he never carried a weapon. He had a chaplain's assistant who carried the weapon, who was essentially, that guy's entire job was to protect my dad. And I think that's interesting because with the veil being thin for me, I see that often in my case, right? I don't carry any weapons. I've been instructed for my mission that while it's important for me to learn how to shoot or know how to shoot, I personally am not to carry a weapon, that I've got those on the other side of the veil and those on this side of the veil who have the assignment to protect me, similar to what my dad had as a chaplain with having a chaplain's assistant. I find that really interesting because that was essentially his bodyguard, and I didn't know any differently. I just knew that every time we moved, when I got a little bit older, I paid attention to who the chaplain's assistant was, because the chaplain's assistant was the one that was going to give his life for my dad if they came to wartime. My dad being 6'6.5", I was always kind of sensitive about that when he'd have somebody that was like 5'10", protecting him. I was like, well, they're going to shoot his head off or something. Yeah. And so I was raised very much so with patriotism. We went to several different functions, the chaplains get-togethers, the brigade parties, the division parties, the get-togethers, the picnics. I was raised where my parents taught me very well about the importance of freedom and the Constitution. Giving the Pledge of Allegiance was very important. We went to the parades. We went to the different activities they had when we would look at the equipment, and there was always a great deal of respect for the military and for the role that the military played, and for agency. It's interesting. There was an interesting mix because, as you know, coming from a military family, there's often can be a lot of strict rules that are kept in a family. I was raised in a very strict family. I had a very dominant dad when it came to making sure that we were respectful and that we valued hard work and that we valued the importance of the lives that had been given for our freedoms in past times. So I, from a young age, every time I remember being at school and just citing the Pledge of Allegiance and getting teary-eyed as a young girl and not understanding, like, why is this so dear to my heart? I'm in third grade and I'm crying and nobody else in my classroom is crying when they give the Pledge of Allegiance. Or when we would stand and watch the processions, or in high school, when I would see men in uniform and I would think about what they had been sacrificing. I remember in Hawaii in 6th grade, waking up every morning at like 6 or 6:30 to the infantry men and women running and singing their songs as they ran. And I remember after my freshman year of college coming home and being like, telling my dad how much I missed hearing that, hearing the familiarity of the military. So it's very much ingrained in me, and it was something that was very much a part of my life. I'm very, very grateful for that upbringing. I'm thankful for the sacrifices of the servicemen and women. Our our chief isn't exactly someone that I agree with, and I don't necessarily feel like we've had a president or chief of staff over the armed forces for a long time that I've agreed with. It's been decades since I felt like we had a president and chief of staff who actually was looking out for the welfare of our servicemen and women. In fact, I think they're doing the opposite right now, where they're putting those lives on the line unnecessarily and purposefully to try to create more havoc for us in the United States. And that absolutely brings me to tears when I think about the sacrifices families are making, knowing that we have a lot of corruption in the military now. And if I had my way, none of us would ever go to war, but I do know that it's part of this mortal existence that Satan, the dragon, has committed himself to causing war on the woman as well as on the men and women on this earth. And it makes me think about what we have right now going on with the book of Revelations coming about on September 23rd, Revelations 12, that the dragon will make war with the woman. And that comes into line with what I understand the founding fathers were asking me to do regarding my mission. That was an earful right there, wasn't it?
It was good, thank you. I heard something yesterday on the internet. It was something like there are, young people today who, if they were given the choice, they would give up their right to vote if it meant they could have their student loans cleared away. I don't know, it felt like an indication to me of the times we live in. How do you feel about the way we view our freedoms nowadays?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, first of all, if they try to throw that out there to people, give up your right to vote and we'll wash it away. We have been absolutely brainwashed in this country, not just with false educations, false ideas, traditions, and belief systems in our school systems, in our churches, in our government, in our societies. I think it's a crying shame where we are as a nation when it comes to Common Core and other things that are being taught in the schools, revisionist history that's been going on at least in my lifetime and longer than that. And we're seeing the fruits of that coming about now as we have millennials and others who have absolutely zero credibility when it comes to knowing what's going on in this country or what has gone on in this country. Therefore, they don't have any idea who to vote for, not to vote for, what to vote for, and whether or not they even care to vote, because they don't have any skin in the game, right? Mm-hmm. They don't know anybody. Most of them have no attachments or connections to anyone who's ever served in the armed forces. Most of them don't even pay attention to what's going on. If they're reading the news, they're getting bad news, they're getting lies, and then they're hearing stuff on social media, which is just a bunch of crap. So I know that we have a generation of millennials coming forward now that are the most valiant spirits that have ever been on the planet, and many of them will give their lives for Christ. And I know that that's what they premortally signed up to do. And when the Lord gathers the elect and he takes those children and he puts them in the mix, if you will, when it's time, it's going to be a rude awakening for them, but it will lead to ultimate exaltation. But in the meantime, it will lead to victory for those who are left to be able to bring about his eternal purposes, which is to preserve the Constitution so that we can go in, build New Jerusalem, and build up the Church of the Firstborn and prepare the way for the Savior to come back so that he can take his rightful place as King of Kings.
Julie, a minute ago you mentioned you wouldn't be surprised if they tried to take that right away, and the question that came to me was, what rights do you think they have taken away, and do you foresee them attempting to take additional rights away from us?
Well, they've tried to take about all of our rights away. The first one that comes to mind is right to privacy. They use this whole freedom of speech thing. They're taking that away even as we speak, and I see them taking that away explicitly in the future. If you say or do something that goes against the norm or what they are saying the status quo is in order to get food, clothing, shelter, and other things in the future, they'll take the freedom of speech away in that manner. It's already been taken away in the news because the news outlets are bought and sold by the puppet masters. I see definitely the right to bear arms being taken away, They're trying to take it away as we speak, and I see that right to bear arms being taken away. That'll have significant impact on the country. I see the right to life being taken away as we have so many abortions going on in this nation. And I just had somebody send something to me that was disheartening. It's another marker in the road. They had a statue of a satanic statue, and the article in the newspaper in Missouri talked about how Missouri just signed a deal. Planned Parenthood in Missouri signed a deal with the Satanists and satanic cult to build more abortion clinics in the state of Missouri, and then the legislature passed it. The judge passed it. So I see in very real ways the right to life being taken. The good news about abortion is if someone is aborted, on the other side of the veil, they do have an opportunity to go on to another estate and to go on to another family. So it's not all over for that spirit if their life is cut short. That gives me hope because of all of the babies that have had their estate cut short or their probation cut short. Same thing with, there's the right to privacy. Every time I fly, which has been about once a month or every other week for 3 years, they have the computers that supposedly, can send off a trigger if you've got some metal or something on you and you have to be patted down. I can wear the exact same outfit to the airport that I did the week before. The computer will show I'm fine 1 minute, and it'll show that I have to have a total pat down the next. It's a load of crap. It's a total false. It's just a facade. It's a lie. Their systems are purposely wired and jacked that way. They're training the people at the airports, in the military, and other forms of government to be suspicious, to be controlling, and to be yes men, basically. And I just see that leading to a lot of future corruption and a lot of problems with control. Same thing with our police departments and our fire stations and other things. We will have good men and women in the armed forces and police departments and school systems and other forms of government that will stand to the occasion. They will rise and they will rebel against the institutions. They will rebel against the system. Many of them will lose their lives for it, but in the end it will be for their good and for ours, as many, many, many of them will not do so, and they will be part of the corrupt system that leads to everything from satanic rituals being ensued and the death of a lot of people. And so it is a very, very heavy topic for me. When I think of the Founding Fathers, I know that they would be turning in their graves except for the fact that they too know the plan, and so they have hope that we can rise above this devastation that's about to come to the country.
Interesting. Are there other things that we ought to be looking for in the near future, things to be concerned of with our government leaders and potential rights being taken away?
Yes, I'd say we need to get familiar with the Constitution. Take a look at that Bill of Rights again, if it's been a long time since you actually read through the Constitution or read through the Bill of Rights. And point by point by point, you can count on them taking every single one of those away unless we do something about it. They already are. They're already trying to, and they will be successful for a season. But we will rise up. We will raise the flag and the banner of freedom, just like Moroni did in his day, Mormon did, and hold that banner and hold that flag. We will rise to the occasion as the elders of Israel gather together with those, including those from the tribes of Israel that will return. And with that, we will combat the enemy forces as we have a standoff in Grand Junction and then later in Denver before we pave the way to New Jerusalem. I witness and testify of this. This is true. I've seen it over and over again. And we just need to have faith and courage and be brave. And we're going to have several of our men that might get shot, but I also have seen that several of those men will come back to life. So I don't want the men, the boys that are of age to go to war to be afraid. Many of you will see incredible miracles. And even if you get shot, you're going on to a better place, or you may just be coming right back to this earth to finish out your mortal probation. So there's always an eternal plan, and we just have to have faith in what that is.
Well, that should give us some hope. Thanks. That definitely gives me some hope. I think often of my forefathers. I'm a son of the American Revolution through Captain Samuel Smith, who was a grandfather to Joseph Smith, and I come through him, and we have great family pride in knowing that our ancestors fought for the freedoms of our nation in the Revolutionary War. I hope someday, I've often wondered if I might have an opportunity to defend our freedoms like grandfathers of old have. I'm grateful for these men. I'm grateful for those who've gone before us and given us the freedoms we had today. I hope everybody in the sound of my voice will do what they can to look in their family histories and look to those within your ancestry who have helped preserve those freedoms and honor their names and try to continue the legacy that they passed on to you.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. I appreciate what you've shared and your witness testimony. I want to witness and testify to each within the sound of my voice that God loves you, that he has a plan for you that's an eternal plan of salvation and of happiness, and that through that plan we can find joy now and into the eternities. I want to witness to you of the importance of the family, the importance of calling upon our ancestors to help with the things that we are working on in our lives, to give us ministering aid and to give us protection as we have guardian angels that will come and assist us as we ask for their help. There is no limit to priesthood power. It's a limitless power, and as we tap into that, we are given additional shielding and protecting. And I encourage you to ask the Lord about what that means to put on the armor of God. Ask the Lord how you can shield yourself, and ask the Lord what you can do to better combat the enemy wherever you may be now or on the other side of the veil. I testify to you that God is willing to do everything he says he's willing to do, which is to fulfill all of his promises to you that he made premortally and all the promises he makes to you now. I know this to be true as I've seen in my life unfolding great miracles that I was promised 13 years ago, and some of those answers have come just this week. Things that I was shown and told about 13 years ago are now coming to fruition. In less than a week's time, I have learned more about my personal identity, more about my personal mission, and it's very, very humbling to be at this point. I testify to you that you can know the same as you seek the Lord's face and do everything you can to call upon him and through his power to reveal to you from him the mysteries of the kingdom. I leave this witness and testimony with you, knowing that God is over all, that he loves you dearly, that we have a brother, even Jesus Christ, who has suffered and died for you, and because of that, he was resurrected, and so will you. You too will be resurrected one day. You have completed your first estate. You have completed your second estate. You are here on your second estate or have completed that second estate, and I witness and testify to you that this is the case. I leave this witness with you and say to you, look to God for all things, knowing that through our obedience to the gospel and to the principles of the gospel, we will understand the doctrines greater as we stick to those things which will keep us in the light and help us become whole and healthy. I leave this testimony with you in God's name. Amen.